Aí, interessante. Por horas de semana.
I've got my door. $100. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أكبر ولله الحمد الله أكبر الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم اجعل ببارا ونسارا وشفارا ورسيدارا وأولادي وبرارا واجعل عند قبر نبيك محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم مستقرا قرارا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي كان موجودا قبل حدوث الأشياء ويبقى بعد فناء الأشياء تفرد بالأفضلية والقدم ووسم كل شيء ما عداه بالفناء والعدم كما قال عز شأنه كل شيء هالك إلا وجهه وكل نفس ذائقة الموت وقال كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام سبحان من لا يخفى عليه اختلاف النيات ولا يعزب عنه معاصي العباد في الخلوات سبحان الله الذي منه خلقة العباد وإليه المعاد فمن يعمل مثقال ذرة خير يره ومن يعمل مثقال ذرة شر يره نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو الملك الذي لا ينازع في ملكه ولا يضاد في حكمه يعذب من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء ويرحمه من يشاء بما يشاء كيف يشاء تعذيبه المسيئين عدل وعفوه تفضل ونشهد أن محمدا سيد المرسلين وخير المبشرين والمنذرين صلى الله عليه وآله الهداة المهديين من ركب سفينتهم نجا واهتدى ومن تخلف عنها ضل فغرق وهوى أوصيكم عباد الله بالاعتصام بالتقوى فإنه حبل متين وأروة وثقى فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا كونوا قوامين لله شهداء بالقسط ولا يجرمنكم شنآن قوم على ألا تعدلوا اعدلوا هو أقرب للتقوى صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I begin by advising myself and all of you to adopt the taqwa and the piety of Allah, as is the best of provisions. The verse that I recited is from Surah Ma'idah, ayat number 8, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses by saying, O you who have faith, be maintainers as witnesses for the sake of Allah, of justice, and ill feeling for a people should never lead you to be unfair. Be fair. That is nearer to taqwa. This ayat usually recited when the concept of social justice or justice in general is addressed, or when the concept of taqwa is emphasized, and other such concepts, how to lead a life, or especially for those who are in the position of leadership. But of course, there's not enough time for me to go into all of these different various aspects of this ayah. So what I will be discussing, which is closer to the theme of the rise of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein ibn Ali, alayhi salatu wassalam. As we go through these ayyam of the month of Safar, when we commemorate the tragedies that took place in Balad al-Sham, and the rising and the rise of Imam Hussein, and the reason behind his rise, which is near or actually exactly regarding these ayat, this ayat that I recited for you. All of the things that are being mentioned in this ayah could be found in the movement of Sayyid al-Shuhada, from social justice, from i'tidal, from piety, and how to be maintainers of people that are under you. One of the most important lessons from Ashura is the recognition of our duty to defend the truth, haqq, and standing up for haqq. Because first and foremost, we need to realize what haqq is. If you don't know what haqq is, then it'll be very difficult for us to take a stand for it. A lot of times things happen in front of our eyes, and we don't know whether we should jump into it or we should not, or should keep away from it. And failure to recognizing haqq could have devastating effects, not right now, but in the future as well. So therefore, it is important for us to recognize our duty to defend the truth and stand up against oppression, which is batil, in every age. And therefore, the qiyam of Imam Hussein was not specific for himself and his companions in the 61st year after Hijrah. Rather, it was a religious obligation emerging from those conditions that can happen anytime, anywhere. And even today, when you see the Ayyam-e-Azab began, and right away, a lot of these sort of doubts start coming out, attacks on Madhhab al-Tashayyu regarding the practices of Azab and the mourning of Sayyid al-Shuhada, which has become sort of like a norm every year, that increasingly more and more opposition is coming about. I guess this is one way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has devised this to clearly show us the face of the evil, show us the face of the batil, and show us the face of the enemy. Because this is one of the discerning points. And as Riwayat mentioned, that in the time of Rasulullah, how would we be able to recognize mu'min from munafiq? It was through the dhikr of Ali. So whenever Ali was mentioned, you will see the face of munafiq and you will see the face of mu'min, by which you will be able to discern between the two. And today is the same thing. When the zikr of Hussein ibn Ali is done, you see some faces turn off, they get bleak, they turn away from the discussion, and they start opposing, and all that comes about, it is against the history repeating itself. So Imam Hussein is an inspiration against social, racial, and economic injustices. We look at the world around us, we find that not everything is near perfect. There are flaws in everything. We ourselves look at our own lives. From the time I was born, from the time I started, studying and learning and working and all that stuff up until this moment. There's so many things that I've done that I regret. There's not a single human being, unless you're infallible, that you don't have regrets about things that you have done in the past. Now, you could be stubborn about it and say, no, that was okay at that time, and just to try to keep that blemish away from you. But deep down inside, when you speak to yourself and you're not facing anyone else, you'll say, yeah, those were true mistakes that I had made. So when an individual, it's very difficult for him or her to lead a life without any flaws and without any defects. How do you expect a society to govern and run without any flaws and defects? There's obviously going to be someone somewhere who's being racially, socially, economically being profiled. And that is very common practice that has become, unfortunately, in the age that we live in. Social justice can be described as a situation in which dominant population is made known of the inequity that leads for others due to their relative position in the structure of power. So if I'm, having some sort of position of my own and power of my own, this is where when I start, marginalizing people of other religions or other faiths or other ethnicities, and I show this nepotism and favoritism toward my own people, which is natural tendency for me to go ahead and promote my own. This is where, if it's done at the level of, a society, then it causes this social injustice. So social injustice occurs in a situation where the equals are treated unequally. Society, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created everyone equally. Now, of course, the concept of equality and the concept of this equity sometimes is taken out of proportion, where we don't need to discuss it in those areas. When it comes to the share of male family members or the female family members and all those areas, it is a different discussion. But here, when it's concerned the society as a whole, this is where the equals are treated unequally and the unequal is treated equally. So both areas, it's not just those who are equal should not be treated unequally, is the opposite as well. There are certain people who have to be given some sort of priority in order for them to be able to lead. If you don't give those protocols, for example, there's a president of a country, there's a governor, if he or she, they are coming to certain places where they will be public, you will expect them to come with some sort of entourage. They will come with their people. There will be, people who will be trying to protect them. There will be law enforcement along with them. There will be security with them. There will be multiple motorcades with them. You look at that and you say, well, these things only belong to the rich and the famous. No, this is what the demand is. This person cannot be walking around like you and I walk around in the streets. If that happened, then of course they could be in danger. Their life could be in danger because they're in the spotlight. So you cannot treat those who are not in the society, the common, to be the way you would treat people who are common. 3 common examples of social justice include discrimination, ageism, and homophobia. I want to focus only on discrimination, its causes, and the solutions of this discrimination. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And our theme will remain, of course, how Imam Hussein presented these ideas for us to fight against any type of injustice that's come about. And a lot of time we speak and we say that this Hussein stood up against oppression. Well, we need to explain what kind of oppression that existed at that time in the form of Yazid and the things that he was doing and how that could be related to us. So one of the things is the discrimination is found in every facet of our life, unfortunately. I don't need to give examples to you. I'm sure as immigrants, some of you have faced discrimination, some of you may not have. It's not like, you can base it on one person's, experience. Rather, you look at it as a whole. Many of us probably would never have faced discrimination in our life. So, well, nothing of that sort has ever happened to me because I was always around good people who are people of values and, mature enough to realize and coexist. But many of us have been in areas and parts where maybe at work, maybe at school, we have been marginalized and discrimination has taken place towards us. Maybe this does not exist earlier on, when we, for example, were living early in the days when people came in, maybe in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s. But as the society is growing and you see more and more immigration, right away, the locals, they start looking at it from this aspect, and you find more and more discrimination. So it's easy to say that it is found in every facet of our life, whether it's education, whether it's employment, whether it's voting, whether it's healthcare services, whether it's transportation, whether it's public accommodations and government benefits and services, you find different levels of discrimination. Of course, I don't need to go into all those details. These are certain areas which can be highlighted and looked up for facts. Discrimination is described as unequal treatment of persons for a reason which has nothing to do with their legal status, for example, their rights or their ability. Has nothing to do with that. For example, so, well, this person is not doing enough work, so that's why I'm not giving him enough pay. That's not the reason discrimination is taking place. And nobody will blame this person. So I got two employees, one works hard, the other one doesn't work as hard. So I pay according to the hardworking person. Nobody will blame me over here that why are you giving this person more and why are you giving that person less? This is not the case of discrimination. So it doesn't have to do with ability or the rights of the people. Discrimination is considered illegal by the federal and the state laws of the United States. These laws prohibit discrimination in employment, availability of housing, rates of pay, right to promotion, educational opportunities, civil rights, and the use of facilities based on race, nationality, creed, color, age, all of these things. White privilege and blacks and other people of color are marginalized in these areas. Imam Hussein considered his movement against those who became rulers upon others by force and through injustice, those who changed haram into halal and vice versa, broke away from the covenant of God Almighty, crossed the boundaries set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he says numerous occasions in Quran, that do not cross the boundaries that have been set by Allah, went against the sunnah of Rasulullah. Imam reminded people in his sermon that he is a role model for all to follow. وَلَكُمْ فِيَّ أُسْوَةٌ. For you, in me, there is this role model, this uswa, for you to go ahead and adopt, for you to go ahead and follow. Now you look at the rulers that exist. People look up to these people. And when they look up to these people, these are standard bearer. These are the people who set examples. And if the ruler is corrupt, if the ruler is causing corruption, then what do you expect to happen in the lower grades of the people? Hence, the essence of the Qiyam of Karbala is widespread in the land and in time. Taking inspiration from this maktab, one should stand against tyranny and sacrifice for honor and freedom. This should be the outcome of the events of Karbala. Yes, the mourning, the weeping, and the crying for Imam Hussein and the household and their tragedies. We see, an animal get killed in front of our eyes brutally. A soft-hearted person will weep. They'll shed a tear. An innocent animal gets killed, or especially if it was an animal that you had adopted or you were keeping with you as an adopted animal. If that gets killed, you might shed a tear or two. When a child who's probably, hasn't done anything, achieved anything, still it's your child is, for example, dies naturally or, through normal means. It's not like a shahadat or someone took his life. It's still you shed tears. You weep for the child, even though this child hasn't achieved anything in the life yet, but it's still because it was your flesh and blood. And if it was your neighbors, you still weep sometimes, and you see, you're sympathizing with them. When this is how the human nature is. So definitely when we think about the greatest personality on the face of the earth in the form of Rasulullah, and his grandson for whom he said, Ana minhum, I am from him, how would you not shed tears for him? But shedding tears is important. That has to be told. The story must be related every single year for those who still have not come close to learning the story. It should be told to them. But our duty, along with shedding the tears, is to go ahead and implement these things, learning the inspiration from this maktab. One should stand against tyranny and sacrifice for honor and freedom. How many of us have gone ahead and shown some sort of inclination that we're able to go ahead and sacrifice ourselves if the need arises? Justice is one of the original messages of all the messengers of Allah. One of the qualities of justice is that it can easily be recognized through our intellect. You don't need to study, in Hawza Ilmiya seminaries or college or universities to be able to understand the concept of justice. A layman, a lay person who has zero education will be able to realize and differentiate between justice. If something is unjust, they will be able to realize that. So justice is one of the original messages, and therefore it could be easily recognized with the aql. And implementing it doesn't require any particular reason. Rather, it is the biggest reason itself. You don't need for justice to be, relevant or a reason behind why justice should prevail. Justice itself is the biggest reason that it should prevail, that it should be implemented, because of what it stands for. You don't need a third source to come and prove the point that justice is, for example, important. So therefore we find that justice doesn't recognize friends or enemies, believers or unbelievers. In fact, it sees all with the one eye, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this ayat that I recited for you, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ عَلَىٰ أَلَا تَعْدِلُوا and let not hatred of a people incite you not to act equitably. Hatred of a people right away, whether it is from your own, whether it is from others, whether it is your family members or otherwise, this should not be the reason for you to go ahead and do anything which is against equitably. And therefore, this is nearer to taqwa. A society which lacks justice indeed lacks humanity as well. And that's what Imam Hussein was standing up for. That society had lost humanity. That society was not just because ruler is Yazid. The types of practices that Islam has brought, the deen that Rasulullah spent 23 years spreading with hard work, is now going down the waste and going down the drain. For that, Imam Hussein has to stand up. So society which lacks justice indeed lacks humanity. That's why you look at those graphic nature of the events of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and his companions. They're very graphic nature, how they were brutally killed. When you tell the story, sometimes some people who have not been very close to it, they might actually find it very hard to believe it. They might say, well, that's far-fetched. Really? That's how it happened? That they killed him first? And first of all, the grandson of the Prophet, he got killed. And then not only they killed him, they didn't bury him. Not only they didn't bury him, they severed his head. Not only they didn't bury and didn't leave his body alone, they severed his head. They trampled the body with the horses. No, it's very difficult to fathom. It's very hard to believe. These pictures, which are of very graphic nature, it sometimes could be very difficult for people to understand. So therefore, Imam Hussein's standing up for tyranny was not because oppression hasn't happened before. No, this oppression has led to the belief the humanity was lacking from that society. That group of people had lost the values of human nature. You've seen it in many places. Many documentaries have created regarding other things. How first time doing something might be difficult. Second time, third time, it becomes a habit. And this is exactly what Imam Hussein is trying to do. A society which lacks justice indeed lacks humanity and purpose of life. There was really no purpose of life left for them. Everyone in a society has honor and rights. If one trespasses the honor and the rights, it is considered zulm and injustice. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised punishment to a zalim, which is the compensation for the suffering of an oppressed. We have the concept of diyat, blood money, indemnity. For example, someone takes the life of another individual by mistake. Now, if you take it by choice or on purpose. The Quran is very clear about it. But by mistake, for example, you were driving and you were not speeding or anything. Someone came in front of you, you ended up hitting them, and that person died. No, you became the cause of death. Or any other scenario that you could think of that ended up taking. I hope nothing like this happens to you. But if that ever happens, there's what? There's blood money, there's indemnity. You think indemnity, this blood money, is the value of the soul that was lost? There's no value for the human soul. Can you put a price on a human soul? Can you put a price on any individual? Yeah, we sell ourselves for a few bucks. But really, a human being, all 7 billion of us in the world, can you put a price tag on one individual? This is how, what is the value and the price of this individual is. You can't even put a price tag on the organs and the body parts that we have in our body, let alone the entire human body, right? Can you put a price tag on the heart? Can you put a price tag on the lungs and the liver and the kidneys and all the other things that God has created for us? Yes, you can get transplants and you pay a price for that and all that stuff. But really, these things are invaluable. So when these individual things are invaluable, the entire human body is invaluable. There's no price tag on it. So the indemnity is not the money for the soul that is lost. Indemnity, the blood money, is the price for the suffering that is caused due to the loss of this life. So when this person is dead, there must be loss of life for family members. Maybe there's a wife, maybe there's children, maybe there are parents. For their suffering, this is the money that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed. Salawat bi Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So therefore, one of the objectives of Imam Hussein's revolution was the implementation of social justice in the society. Reason injustice doesn't start from Yazid's policy, only goes back to the time of his father, and in fact the time the Umayyad came into power, a history lesson which we all have gone through. As many have said that the arrow shot by Hurmula on the day of Ashur was not shot by Hurmula. It was shot from Saqifa. That's when the arrow had left, and now it comes and pierces into the heart and the halaq of Ali Asghar. It did not emerge from the hands of Hurmula, rather the history of it could be led back all the way to the events of Saqifa. This is why we read in one of the letters of Imam Hussein to the people of Kufa, he said, Amma ba'd faqad alimtum anna Rasulullah qad qala fi hayatihi, that Rasulullah had said in his life that whoever sees a tyrant sultan, one who considers haram to be halal, breaks the covenant of Allah, goes against the sunnah of Rasulullah, acts with sins and aggression. And if one doesn't try to change this rhetoric with their speech or with their action, then it is appropriate for Allah to enter him in the same place as of that oppressor. So if I don't stand up, not only that I'm causing injustice myself, but I'm helping, and there's nothing stopping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise me along with this oppressor of the time. What is stopping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from doing so? Even the Imam is addressing the people of Kufa, but he's speaking to every freedom-loving individual. Don't think today when we see white supremacy and discrimination, it is because we are so far away from the time of Rasulullah. Because we have gone away, we're not even living in Hijaz, and we're away from the land itself and the time of Rasulullah. No, not too long after the demise of Rasulullah was this massive discrimination into practice, even by those who heard Rasulullah say that La fadla li Arabiyyin ala ajami wa la li ajami ala Arabi. There's no fadl and virtue of an Arab over a non-Arab or non-Arab over an Arab. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The only criteria for superiority is taqwa and nothing else. Some people today justify the acts of Yazid, his father, and the other oppressors of Banu Umayyah by saying they were mujtahideen and they acted according to their religious edicts. And even if they made mistakes, they repented, and you cannot go ahead and curse or swear or send la'nat upon them, because they are the ones who will be the recipient of the tawbah and the maghfirat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you deny, and this is the end of it, inshallah, if you deny the injustice of the past, you won't recognize the injustice of today. If we don't recognize the injustice that happened in the past, if I don't look at myself, what I did last year and the mistakes that I made, I won't be able to go ahead and fix them this year. If I don't recognize the injustice of the past, I will blindly go through the injustice that happens in front of me today. And therefore, the sentence, Kullu yawmin Ashura, or Kullu ardin Karbala, even if it's not a hadith, but it is a reality which doesn't undermine the land of Karbala, the sanctity of that piece of land on earth, and the actual day of Ashura, which was the darkest and the most devastating day ever in the long history of mankind. Indeed, it speaks about the constant struggle between haqq and batil, even in the present day and age that we are going through. The justice that exists, kullu yawmin ashura wa kullu ardin karbala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, give us the tawfiq and ability while we're going through these ayyam azah, reading and hearing about the sacrifice of Imam Hussein and his companions, give us the ability to act upon the teachings of Sayyid al-Shuhada, standing up against oppression and tyranny, having the ability and the guts to go ahead and call that which is wrong, wrong, and to side that which is right. إن أحسن الحديث وأبلغ الموعظة كتاب الله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا إله إلا هو العظيم الكريم غافر الذنب وقابل التوب وهو الغفور الرحيم سبحان من سبقت رحمته وغضب وبسط اليدين بالرحمة سبحان من لم يكلف نفسا إلا دون وسعها وفان السيئات ولم يجاز بها سبحان من لا يزداد ولا معصي لعباد إلا كرما وجودا ولا كثرة الذنوب إلا عفوا وصفا نشهد أن لا إله إلا هو لا تغفر للعباد بجوده ولا بعض المذنبين بحلمه ونشهد أن محمدا نبيه وحبيبه سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين بعثه رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليه وآله على قد أمركم الله في موكب كتابه بالصلاة على نبيه وحبيبه فقال تعليما لكم وتشريفا للصفي إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيد المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وعلى إمام المسلمين وقائد الغر المحجلين أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى سيدة نساء العالمين وبذة خاتم النبيين سيدتنا فاطمة بنت رسول الله صلوات الله عليها وعلى الحسن المجتبى وعلى الحسين الشهيد بكربلاء وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي عليه الصلاة والسلام اللهم صل على مولانا صاحب الزمان ما هي آثار البدع والطغيان حاتم أبنية الشرك والنفاق حاسد فر البغي والشقاق صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آباء الكرام اتصلت الليالي والأيام اللهم عجل فرجا وسهل مخرجا واكفل ناظرنا بنظرة منا إليه واجعلنا من المستشهدين بين يديه وتفضل على أمراء المؤمنين بمزيد التوفيقات وزيادة الإقبال وألوف الدرجات اللهم افعل بنا ما أنت أحل ولا تفعل بنا ما نحن أحل بجاه محمد وآله المعصومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين اللهم اجعلنا ممن يذكر فتنفعه الذكر ان الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Please silence your phone. Thank you.
الله أكبر
الله أكبر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار يحمل أسفارا بئس مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين ولا يتمنونه أبدا بما قدمت أيديهم والله عليم بالظالمين قل إن الموت الذي تفرون منه فإنه ملاقيكم ثم تردون إلى عالم الغيب والشهادة فينبئكم بما كنتم تعملون يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة فاسعوا إلى ذكر الله وذروا البيع ذلكم خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون فإذا قضيت الصلاة فانتشروا في الأرض وابتغوا من فضل الله واذكروا الله كثيرا لعلكم تفلحون وإذا رأوا تجارة أو لهوا انفضوا إليها وتركوك قائمة قل ما عند الله خير من اللهو ومن التجارة والله خير الرازقين الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار بجاه محمد وآله الأطهار الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمد رب صل على محمد وآل محمد سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده رب صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته وقوموا وقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. وربنا أفرغ علينا الصبر وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين بجاه محمد وآله الطاهرين. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. رب صل على محمد وآل محمد. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم
صل على محمد وآل محمد. تسبيح جناب فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واستغفر الله الذي لا اله الا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والاكرام واتوب اليه. All of us together. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Let's recognize the sponsors of today's Jummah and request for Fatiha for Quraishi family. Maulvi Muhammad Quraishi, Ghulam Jan Quraishi, Amrin Zafar Quraishi, Naveed Hassan Quraishi, Manawar Begum Quraishi. Please recite the Fatiha for their Mahdoumeen as well as their own Mahdoumeen. Let's also recite 5 times Dua Sehat Amayji for all those people who are in need of Quran, going through a difficult time, physically, financially, spiritually, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings them out of difficulty, especially for Shaheen Isfahani, who's been in Corona in Pakistan and Malaysia as well. Please remember all of them in your dua. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu yakshifu. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu yakshifu. Amman yujibul mustarra idha da'ahu yakshifu. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء ويجعلكم خلفاء الأرض أإله مع الله قليلا ما تذكرون. Inshallah, tomorrow, Saturday, there will be Majlis observing the Shahadat of daughter of Imam Hussein, Bibi Sakina Salamullahi Alayha. The program will be before Maghrib, starting at 5:30 p.m. With Quran, so Salam Marsiya, and Inshallah Majlis will be reciting to that Majlis. And program, of course, will finish before Salat Maghrib. So your your attendance is requested on time. Make sure that you're here around 5:30 so that you can start the program on time and conclude before Maghrib Salah. Also upcoming Majalis from next Friday, the next series of Majalis will start commemorating the Jahlum and the Arba'in of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein bin Ali alayhi salam. That series will begin inshallah from Friday, September 24th. 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, Tuesday will be the last Majlis, which will be the day of Arba'in itself. On Saturday, September 25th, and there's observance of the Shahadat of Imam Allah and Salam. That Majlis will take place. Again, the timings will all be the same. That have been gone out with the email. Program will start with Salat al-Maghrib, so look out for that. Also on Tuesday, September 28th, which will be the day of Al-Rain as well, we will have the annual blood donation drive. The link was sent out for you to register ahead of time, so you can register your spot. The blood mobile will be outside, and what a great cause, while we are commemorating the sacrifice of the blood that was shed for the revival of this religion. We go ahead and do our azah by donating blood for the revival of mankind, inshallah. So keep that in mind and attend to all these programs. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته يقوم ويقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ربنا اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الحمد لله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه الله أكبر سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان الله سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.
لا
صل على محمد تسبيح فاطمة الزهراء سلام الله عليها. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أستغفر الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم الرحمن الرحيم ذو الجلال والإكرام. فاسأله أن يتوب علي توبة عبد ذليل خاضع فقير بائس مسكين مستقيم مستجير لا يملك لنفسه نفعا ولا ضرا ولا موتا ولا حياة ولا نشورا. اللهم إني أعوذ بك من نفس لا تشبع ومن قلب لا يخشى ومن علم لا ينفع ومن صلاة لا ترفع ومن دعاء لا يسمع. اللهم إني أسألك اليسر بعد العسر والفرج بعد الكرب والرخاء بعد الشدة. اللهم ما بنا من نعمة فمن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. اللهم صل على محمد وآل
وقد جاءك الليل ساعة